Hello. So today also we are going to discuss about VPC. So we will build an infrastructure like this. So this is Mumbai region. I have shown only two availabilities on 1A and 1B because these two availabilities on only we will be using for today's demo. We'll create four subnet. The subnets are named like public one and private one. In 1A availability zone and in 1B availability zone we will create public 2 and private 2 subnets. Why we are calling private and public? It's just a name, but the thing is, if a subnet is attached to an internet gateway, that means it has an internet connectivity. So that's the reason we are calling it as public. So in this scenario, the public one and public two, we will attach the internet gateway so that the instances or the resources which we are creating in these two instances, public one and public two, will be able to connect to the internet and we can also connect these instances from outside world. In private one, the private one, we are not going to attach any internet gateway or any connectivity. So how we will connect to these the instances in these subnets? So basically to connect to the private instances in private subnet, we have to first connect to the instances in public one or public 2. From there we have to do SSH or RDP to the instances in the private subnets. So that's what the demo today. So let's log into the AWS console, and this is the Mumbai region. Let's go to the VPC first. There is a VPC. Okay, so okay, let it load. I have only one VPC. There is a default VPC. So for better identification, I'm naming this VPC as default VPC. Okay, let me create, and there are subnets. So these all are the subnets, default subnets. One availability zone. Let me rename this as 1A, 1B, 1C. Default subnet 1A. Let this will be default subnet 1B and default subnet 1C. So these are just for the better identification in the AWS console. Okay, let's check the route tables. Again, this is a default route table. Default route table. Okay, and this route table is mapped to the default VPC. Correct. And yeah, we have an internet gateway. So default IGW internet gateway. That's about it. So now we are going to create the VPC first. Let's name this VPC as custom VPC. See the IP address. Okay, so let's create the VPC first. So to create a VPC, go to your VPCs and click on the top right corner, create VPC. VPC only, custom VPC. I'm using IP version 4. I'm not going to the IPAM. 92.168.1.0 the 24. So this is the IP version for CIDR I will be using, and tenancy, default tenancy. I'm not going to use any IP version 6 or any other feature. So no IP version 6 CIDR block I'm using. That's it. So I created a VPC, and this is the default VPC. Sorry, not the VPC ID, a unique VPC ID, and there are certain default services. Those services are also added to the VPC, and you can also see a default route table also got created. Let's refresh. So this is the route table got created. So custom RT, custom route table. Okay, So default routable, there will be an entry. I already told you, since this default routable attached to the default VPC, and default VPC is attached to internet gateway. So you know what all will be the routes in this. See, this is the local network. Anything else, it will forward to the internet gateway. That's it. Okay. So in our case, we just created a VPC, and by default, a route table got created. We just named it to custom route table. Let's check the entry in the route table. Now let's create the subnets. To create the subnets, subnet 1, subnets, click on create subnet, select the VPC which we created, that is a custom VPC, and subnet name as public 1. Let's go to the diagram again once again. Here is the public one. Okay, public 1, availability zone. This 1A availability zone I'm going to select as per the diagram. So public 1, 1A availability zone, and this is the complete IP version for CIDR block. In this network, 2.168.1.0/26. This is the network which I am going to use for the public 1 subnet. So basically 64 IPs will be there. In fact, there won't be 64 IPs will not be available because there are some default services which will be utilizing couple of IP. So if I remember correctly, only 59 IPs will be available for the EC2 instances or resources inside this subnet. Okay, so basically 2 bits we are using for the networks. Creating the subnets now. Let's create the public 2 subnet. So we are going to attach the subnet to the custom VPC, and 192, sorry, subnet name is public 2. Let's go back to the diagram. Public 2 is the 192.168. This should be there is a typo in the diagram. It should be 64. Okay, so one public 2, availability zone will be 1B, 192.168.1.64.26. So I added 64. This comes under 64 network. So from 64 till 127, 64 IPs. So 1B public 2. Okay, so our public 2 network is subnet is now created, and this goes to the custom VPC. Let's create the private one now. So according to the diagram, private one is having 128. So custom VPC 192.168.128/26. Okay, this goes to 1A again. Look at the diagram. This goes to 1A, and 168.1.1 to 8/26, right? Okay, 192.128/26, 1A. Okay, so oh, sorry, there was a typo. Name should be private 1. Okay, private 1, right? So I'm creating it. So private 1 is created now. Just checking in the console. So private 1 is attached to the custom VPC. The IP address is 1.128. Okay, now let's create the private 2. Selecting custom VPC. Subnet name is private 2.
preference is 1B, and the IP network should be 192.168.1.192/26. Okay, this is a fourth network. Okay, right. So see, now all the four subnets are created, which are private 1, private 2, public 1, public 2. Now, suppose if we are creating an instance in this particular subnet, this is a public subnet, right? So when I create an instance, that instance should get a public IP. So till this point of time, we were creating a EC2 instance, and we were getting the public IP automatically. So there is a settings we should enable. I'll show you the setting. Okay. So we are going to the subnet setting, public 1, select the subnet setting and edit, click on edit subnet settings and check this box, enable auto assign public IP version 4 address, so that when we place or when we launch an EC2 instance, the instance will get a public IP, right? So I'm going to do the same thing for the public 2 subnet. Go into the edit subnet settings, enable auto assign public IP version 4 address. So now we are clear that whenever we are launching an instance in the public 1 and public 2 subnet, the instance will get IP address, the public IP address. Hope that is clear. Now let's check the route table to see the entries. Sorry. Okay. So going to the route table, we know that a custom route table got created when we created the custom VPC. And yeah, currently the route table contains only one entry. That means if the route table receives address within this network, any address within this network, it will forward to it know where to forward, right? But it does not know if it receives an IP address with outside of this network range. That route is currently not there. Public subnet, let them use a common route table, and a private one, let them use a different route table, because public 1, public 2 are going to are internet facing servers, right? We will attach an internet gateway soon. So definitely these two subnet should have a different route table, and the other two, private 1 and private 2, should have another type of route table. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to the create route table option. Let's create a route table for the private one. So this is for the custom VPC, and the custom VPC private RT. Okay, and this route table should be attached to the VPC, custom VPC. That's it. Right. So we created a route table, and what we are going to do, this route table is a private route table. So we are attaching the private subnets to this route, attached to this particular route table. So the subnet attached to this route tables are private 1 and private 2. I hope this is clear. And now we save the association. Okay. And let's go back to the diagram once again. Like, so we created public 1 and public 2, and also we created private 1, private 2. We created a private route table and associated these two subnet into the private route table. But we don't have any IGW in the public space. So what we are going to do, we will create an internet gateway. Okay, let's go back to the console, and I'm going to the internet gateway, creating an internet gateway. So this will be creating IGW for the custom VPC. So custom VPC IGW. So that's the internet gateway name. We created the internet gateway, and this should be attached to the custom VPC. That's it. Okay. Now we attached internet gateway to the custom VPC. This VPC. I'm going to the route table. The custom VPC route table. This is the default route table got created during the VPC. Let's check the associations. See, currently public 1 and public 2 are actually connected or associated with this particular route table. We should add a route. So it currently it has only the local routing information. So to enable the internet connectivity from internet gateway, select the IGW. That's it. So other than 192.168.1.0 network, if anything else comes, it should forward the request to the internet gateway. That's it. The custom route table is being used by public 1 and public 2, and we have the routes added in the route table. Definitely the instances in the public 1 and public 2 will be able to make connection to the outside world, and we also will be able to connect to the instances in these two subnets, I mean public 1 and public 2. So that's what we did right now. Okay, so let's go back to the EC2 instance screen. Let's create an instance. Launch instance. I'm going to launch this instance in the public 1. So SRV public 1. So this is just for identifying the server. SRV public 1. Let it be AWS Linux. T2 micro. Key pair I'm selecting guild training, whatever it is. I'm going to place this EC2 instance in the custom VPC public 1. So this is a public 1. So see, this is auto assign public IP. Select existing security group. I don't have any security group. It looks like I need to create a security group. So I'm going to enable SSH and RDP. Let me enable HTTP as well. This is just for identification. Okay, copying the same name and in the description. So SSH anywhere already added, and adding RDP. It's 3389 from anywhere added. Then also the HTTP from anywhere. So 3 ports I added allowed in this security group. Launch instance. Okay, so according to this diagram, we are launching an EC2 instance, AWS Linux in the public 1. So as I told you, this subnet is already attached to the internet gateway, not the subnet. This VPC is attached to internet gateway, but however, the subnet has the routes in the route table to connect to the internet. So we should be able to make connection to the EC2 instance. Let's check. Going back to the instances screen to see the instances details. So this is the IP address I'm going to connect. Yes, so basically I'm able to connect to the instance using SSH. Why? Because in the security group I enable the SSH port, plus we have the routes in the route table attached to the subnet, that is public one, and also we have the internet gateway. So that's the reason we are able to connect to the instances in the public one. Let's launch another instance in the private subnet. Okay, we know that there are no internet gateways attached to it. Launching the instance, I'm going back to the instances screen, clicking on the launch instance tab. Okay, so this is the server name srv. This is private, right? Private one, srv private one. Selecting AWS Linux and T2 micro, key pair selected, and I'm going to select the custom VPC. Subnet is private one. That means this subnet. Okay, so I selected private one here. Since this particular subnet is not connected to the internet, there is no point in assigning the public IP. It's a waste, right? So let this option be disabled. Even though we enabled, we won't be able to make connection. Okay, so selecting the security group. That's it. Our instance will be ready in another 1 minute. Anyway, I'm clicking on the connect button, and okay, so we enabled the SSH. We are unable to make the connection. Why? Because it is having only private IP. Even though it is having a public IP, we won't be able to make the connection because, as I told you, there is no NAT internet gateway attached to the, or there is no route. Basically, there is no route configured in the route table. Suppose if you want to connect to the server using the private IP, how you do that? Either you need to log in into the first server using SSH. From this server, you have to make another SSH so that you will be connected to the instances in the, in the private subnet. I'll show you. So this is the public one server in the public one domain. So now we are connected to the this instance. From this instance, I'm trying to make an SSH. Let us see how this is going to work. 1 second. See, we're done. So we used this server, the instance in the public one domain, public one subnet as a landing zone server, and we logged into this server, and from there we connected to the private one instance in the private one. Okay, hope this lecture is clear. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create a NAT gateway and attach to any of the public subnet, because these public subnet already have the internet connectivity, so that we are attaching the NAT gateway to either public one or public 2, so that the instances in the private one or private 2 will be able to make the internet connections. Okay, so let's go back to the NAT gateway configuration. VPC is loaded. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create a NAT gateway. To add the name, this is for the custom VPC NAT gateway, right? Custom VPC NGW. the NAT gateway should be attached to the public one or public 2, because only these two subnet has the internet connectivity, right? So we should attach the NAT gateway to the either public 1 or public 2, right? Elastic IP. For a NAT gateway, there should be an elastic IP association. The elastic IP association. Without an elastic IP, you cannot create or you cannot configure a NAT gateway. So I'm going to click on allocate elastic IP so that I'll get an IP address. Okay. So what we did right now, we are going to create a NAT gateway, named the NAT gateway, selected the subnet which already has the internet connectivity. So we either public 1 or public 2 we can select, and we confirmed this is the public. The connectivity type is the public. Okay. And I clicked on allocate elastic IP to get a public IP address for the NAT gateway and create NAT gateway. Okay. Now, so we have a NAT gateway, and NAT gateway is attached to the public 1 subnet which has the internet connectivity. But we have to have some entry in the route table to point to the NAT gateway. If the EC2 instance want to connect to the outside world, so definitely this will be an IP address other than 192.168.1.0, right? If any IP address which is outside of the 192.168.1.0, it should route the traffic to NAT gateway. Then only the instances in this subnet will be able to connect to the internet, right? So let's go to the route table, and this is the private route table because private subnets are attached to the private route table. So in the private route table, we are adding an entry. Currently, the private route table contains only the local routes. So any IP address other than 192.168.1.0, sorry, the request should be routed to the NAT gateway. See, simple it is. Now, see subnet association, private 1 and private 2, and we have a NAT gateway association here. Now let's check the instance is able to make connection to the internet. For that, I'm just ping Facebook. See, it is able to connect to the internet. I hope this demo is clear. So what we did, we created 4 subnet in 2 availability zone. The names are like public 1 and public 2, which has an internet gateway attached. And how actually the internet gateway is attached to the VPC, but how they are able to make the connection, because in the route table we made an entry other than the local network. If anything comes, forward to the IGW. But the private 1 and private 2, they don't have any internet connectivity. So we initially connected to these servers using SSH after logging into the from instances in the public one, right? So from public one we connected to the EC2 instance in the private one. Later what we did, we configured the NAT gateway. Using NAT gateway, the instances in the private subnet connected to the internet, right? I hope this lecture is clear. If you have any questions, comment on the video. I'll glad to respond. Thank you.